Happy New Year. It's 2026, 1st of January, and we've got a fresh slate, new ideas, lots of creativity to get stuck into. Now, if I just flash back to last year, we've done lots of experiments with tools and materials, and those experiments have really helped us to exploit the potential of the materials or the tools we've been using. So I kind of want to take last year's learning and then put it into a theme. And this year's theme is Wind in the Willows. And I have the book here, and I've also watched a few YouTube films just to sort of look at different ways that the story is told. But I've avoided, like the plague, which has been very difficult to do, any other artists' illustrations of the characters that we know and love in The Wind in the Willows. So there's the mole, ratty, toad and badger as the main characters, and then there's other supporting characters as well. But what I didn't want to do is be so influenced by other artists and illustrators that it would really inform how I tackled this project. Now, of course, I've seen it in the past, so it can't help but be in there somewhere and influencing me somehow, but I kind of want to keep the ideas as unique and as pure as I can and go about creating my characters in a way that might be a bit different. And for example, I've made Mr. Mole, Mrs. Mole, and you'll see how I've made up her character from a bit of a photo repositioning of a lady gardener and a mole coming out of the ground. And it's that kind of thing that I want to share with you, so you can really get to the source of how to build these things up for yourself. And with that in mind, I'm not going to illustrate every chapter, every page of this book. What I'm going to do for the first few months, certainly for the first 4, is really look at each character, so one character a month, and their environment. And I'm going to begin each lesson with a bit of sketching, and that sketching will build the character. And then if you're into the painting project, you can then progress on to doing something more with the environment in which that character lives and using the colour to really exploit that world as well. So what does that look like? Well, I'm working in my sketchbook. I'll show you that first. I've got so much on the desk to show you. So I'm working on a pith sketchbook just because I know it holds a good deal of material. And to begin with, I put the lady gardener and a mole coming out of the ground together on Procreate, and you can do this manually, analog way as well. And I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. And I put this together first of all, and just using soft pastels, because I was thinking the soft pastels would feel quite earthy, but they were a bit too soft and wafty for my liking, and I quickly decided to move on from that material, even though I used it again just to add a bit of warmth later on. And so next couple of pages, I start to play with the colour palette of restricted, limited palette. So really looking at the sort of magenta purpley colours into the sienna browns, into the warm yellows, and restricting it at that, apart from black and white, so I could have a shade of all of those colours by adding a bit of black, or a tint from all of those colours by adding a bit of white. And then this character appeared, and even though I quite liked her, she wasn't giving me mole feeling, and I was thinking how little and curled up these characters are, and I'd managed to elongate it far too much. So then you'll see these sketches, I can really start to tell that I was thinking about a smaller character, and it turns into almost a teardrop shape, and I really like that shape but with those accessories, which then led me on to this one, which I was much happier with, and that became my character. So it took me 3 goes at getting that character, let's say 4 goes, because obviously I'd drawn it out in Procreate already, which I'll just put a little sneak preview of that over here. And I'm using my sketchbook to work through these situations, but also to plan. So you can see there, to plan. I'll move out of the way so it might focus better. So I'm planning the inside of the book. So for the first 4 months, what I want to do is almost create like a dummy book for each character and their environment. And so this is Mrs. Mole, and you can see that I've cut out here around her to play with depth, and the concertina is going up, because in the beginning of the story the mole character is coming up and discovering the world outside of his burrow, or her burrow. And I've played around with a bit of typography here, and I've also just sort of tried to be a bit more playful about thinking about it doesn't have to read that way, it could read that way. And that actually helped me out when I came to design the inside. So when you open up the book, you then reveal all of the burrow information and all the different rooms, and you can add lots of light and texture to it, and you can repeat your character again on the inside, but obviously looking the other way. And I've put a mood board together for you for a few ideas of rooms, and it's on a PDF on the download, so you can just print that out and have a look, and you'll see where I've picked the ideas from and then simplified them to add them to this particular scene. Now I've left the back blank purposefully. I don't know how I'm going to join all of these together yet, and I might not, but I want to have that option just in case we do. So I'm leaving that blank at the moment. So we've got a front cover and a double page spread to tackle. And we're going to do that for each of the characters over the next few months. But it might be that the format changes each month to suit the character, where the concertina folding out and up really suited the mole that would be burrowing up. It might not suit Toad, won't suit Badger, or it won't suit Ratty. For example, Ratty flows like the river, so I imagine something that flows out would suit Ratty, whereas Badger, for example, a wise character, steady, somebody who you could go to for advice. It kind of feels very safe, very sort of secure. So I'm just thinking about those different formats that we can explore over the next 4 months. And then after those 4 months, I want us to put it all together, as in all of our learning, and build a concertina sketchbook for the remainder of the year, which will involve all of the characters and the environments, and maybe additional ideas that we've thought of as we've gone through the process of making these. So by the end of, well, this time next year, you're going to have a substantial amount of work which looks at things in really unique ways, whether it's pop-ups, whether it's cutouts, whether it's folds, whether it's the mechanics of how you're displaying, or indeed how you're using your materials to experiment with. So you're welcome to, you might have the book already, but you're welcome to buy yourself the book and have a read through, or watch a YouTube video about Wind in the Willows. But try not to get influenced by another set of work that's already done on this subject. It will influence you more than you realise, and it will be very hard not to replicate that, and we're trying not to do that. And I've got a load of materials to show you here, so I'm going to just go through that now. And it could be that you don't have all of these materials, and my advice to you is to always use what you've got, so you're using it to its potential, and then every so often treat yourself something to add to that kit. But I'm going to show you what I used just so you know. Now, the lovely brown that you can see on there, that was made with walnut darkening medium, which if I put it over my face, there we go. And it's like a lovely, rich, pigmented, dark, warm, dark brown ink. So if you already have a dark, warm brown watercolour, that might just do the trick for you. I'm using ink on this particular thing because I'm also using bleach and water, and the bleach and water, I can't get that to focus, sorry. Oh, there you go. The bleach and water is a ratio of half and half, 50 and 50 in a spray bottle, and when I spray that on ink, it gives me a really lovely textural return. So if I can show you the very bottom edges of this, can you see those speckles, those orange speckles? The bleach has created that. Now, I wouldn't get that effect with watercolour, but I would using either the walnut darkening medium, or Quink ink is quite a good one as well, but typically that's usually only available in black, blue and red. So have a play around with that. I did put some of the walnut medium into a little spray bottle with some water, so it's got a diluted application, and that spray can then give me those diffused speckles on the page here. I also did the same with black ink, Quink ink and water, and I used that sparingly because I mainly worked with the brown. As usual, I've got a palette on the go, a little palette, I've got a pot of water, I've got favourite brushes, whether it's a bigger flat head or a smaller detailed brush, and I've got a pencil, quite a soft pencil, and I've got a rubber. I've also got a craft knife. I've got a couple of craft knives on the go here. There we go. And that helped me to achieve the cutouts. I've got a bone folder which helped me get a sharp edge on my folds of my concertina from the book. That's not necessary. You could use the edge of a paintbrush, you could use the edge of a pencil. Just make sure it's clean, and then you can just slide it across your creases and it makes them nice and sharp. I also used some soft chalk pastel, and I used the craft knife just to shave it off so it diffused it on the page so I could easily smudge it in, rather than drawing it on, because that pushes it in too hard to the page and I really wanted a soft glow effect. Then the main colours of paint I used, I restricted my palette as you saw from the swatch. So I've got a violet, I've got a burnt sienna, and I've got a warm deep yellow. And this is acrylic gouache, and it can be diluted with water. The pigment is very high, really strong colours, and the opacity is really strong as well, so really good to use. And I extended the reach, as in the reach of tint and shade, with black and white, and that was my restricted palette. And then to work with that but with detail, I'd then find colour pencils to match those colours. So for example, if I mixed violet and white together, it would make a pink. I would then go and find a pink colour pencil if I needed to do a little bit of detail. But this limited palette really helped me keep it quite unified and really strong together. It's very tempting to put the blue in for the sky and the brown in for the earth and the green in for the leaves, and suddenly before you know it you've got all of the colours going on, and it can look quite busy, whereas a limited palette can really help you focus the story and the attention. So I also I sometimes used a neo pastel, but not very often, and again that was sticking to my colour range. And I also had some white pencils. I tested a few out just to see which ones would work over the gouache paint, and I quite like this polychromo. It's like, almost like a soft grey, and that worked really well. For example, let me show you the checks and the spots, but then equally so did the white gouache and a tiny detail brush. So you can get around the same description in lots of different ways. So I had a palette for the gouache, but top tip is try and get a slightly bigger tray for all of your materials and tools that you're using, so you can just at the end of the day pop it all in the tray and then put it to one side for when you're ready to work on it again. And I find this really helps, because if you tidy everything away, you've got to remember what you were using, and I don't know if you're like me, if you've had a slip, it's not always easy to remember the next day. So that's the materials. I've used 200 GSM cartridge paper, which is about as thick as you can go to get a neat fold. Any thicker and then it gets really tricky to fold. Thinner, it can limit the layers of materials and you're going to use, and limit the amount of wet stuff you're going to spray. And especially because we're spraying a bit of bleach on here, that kind of disintegrates the fibres as well, so you need a bit of body to work on top of. And I also, at one point, I take a photograph of the front cover that I've made, and I print it out just on cheap printer paper, and I make a little mock-up dummy book to kind of figure out, do I want to put this writing in there, do I want the cutouts, and then if I do, how does that impact the burrows and the tree and everything on the inside double spread. So I really recommend doing a little dummy spread once you've done your front cover. Print it out on A4 paper and just have a play around with your cutouts and play around with the physical thing of it. You know, how does it feel to open up, and what space have you got to create the different dens that we're describing there. So there's lots to get stuck into, and you can break it up into lots of mini projects if you wanted to. So don't feel you have to go at it all in one go. And I would say that the first one will feel a bit like you're getting used to it, and by the time we've done a few of them, you'll be a real dab hand at it. So when it comes to making the real book with all of the characters together, we've got some experience to lean on. So that's the plan. And on the video I've got some bits which I'm talking over and narrating, and then other bits where I'm just adding a bit of music to it so you can chill out and watch it, and it's a mix of the two. If there's something significant that I need to tell you, oh, I'm doing this at this point, that might be helpful for you just to look out for. On your downloads, as I say, you've got a couple of mood boards so you can help design really cozy burrow dens, and then you've also got a palette swatch, and you've also got a couple of final photos of my finished piece. Now, it could be that yours is wildly different, and would be brilliant, because you're putting your own mark on it, your own spin on it. Or it could be that you're just copying to kind of get to know the process and how this kind of feels, and that's absolutely fine too. If you get stuck at any point, just give me a shout and let me know, and I'll try and guide you through it. But take your time and enjoy it, and save a little bit of creative time for you and yourself this year, where you can really get stuck into it and it becomes a lovely creative habit. Anyway, enough whittering on. I shall get to the lesson. I keep looking down here because I'm editing here all the bits to show you the different stages. Oh, one more thing that's added in the attachments is a list of materials and tools and stages and tips, and that might just be helpful just to sort of look through and tick off as you go, or sort of do a bit of a checklist when you're sort of looking around your own toolkit to see what you have and you haven't got, or what alternatives you're going to use. Right, that's it. Let's get on with it. I began this character by merging two worlds: a woman gardener, grounded, practical, familiar, and a mole with its head and paws built for earth and burrowing. And at first I let those references sit almost literally together, working them through until I arrived at a simple black and white character sketch. From there I moved into colour, and I created a limited palette, knowing that brown would need to dominate, the colour of soil and tunnels and work done close to the ground, with just a few supporting tones to soften it and lift it. And as I started to colour in the sketch, something shifted. The character felt too long, too upright, too human. So I began to shorten her and round her out, let her hunch a little more, closer to the weight and rhythm of a real mole. And that's where the character started to feel right, more compact, more rooted, as if she belongs to the earth rather than just working on top of it. I always love adding the really satisfying details. I don't know if you're the same, like the whiskers, the stripes, the little spots on the headscarf, the glasses and the tweed checks. Those are the moments where, for me, the character really starts to come to life. I work into the acrylic gouache with coloured pencil, letting it sit on top rather than blending it in. The polychromo pencils are perfect for doing this, just the right amount of waxy mix to kind of hold their own. They hold their line beautifully and give just enough texture without fighting the paint. To finish, I add a few finer white details with a thin brush and gouache. Small marks, but they lift everything, catching the light or sharpening edges, and give the character a sense of presence. My top tip is to keep everything in a tray: coloured pencils, inks, rubbers, spray bottles, all in one place. It makes tidying up at the end of your session really easy, and just as importantly, it makes starting the next day or whenever you can pick it up again so simple. After a sleep, I often forget exactly what I've been using, and having it all there means I can step straight back into the work without breaking the flow or overthinking it or second guessing myself. The next section is where I'm starting to think about the full front page spread. So as it's unfolded, the mole's at the bottom, and what does her world look like around her? So I'm sketching ideas to work through these thoughts quickly and loosely, letting the ideas stay provisional rather than fixed. And I do a couple of versions. The long vertical format is a challenge, but it feels right for the character. It echoes the shape of tunnels and shafts of earth, and the way her world drops down rather than spreads out. At this stage, I'm just looking for ideas, possibilities. So it's a good tip to do a few of these as if they're little thumbnails that you can consider those possibilities. Next, I fold the A2 cartridge paper in half lengthways, and then again in half, and then again in half. And I use a bone folder to really sharpen each fold. This is one of the stages where it's worth taking your time, lining up the edges and the corners as carefully as you can so everything matches up neatly and the final piece sits beautifully. The next stage is to commit the shapes of her burrow into the cartridge paper using walnut ink. I start by laying in the main forms with a brush and keeping it quite diluted with water, keeping the marks loose and responsive rather than overly precise. And from there I can build up layers. I can brush in more ink in some areas, I can spray areas with a mix of ink and water, or ink, bleach and water, and letting it diffuse on the paper. And I blot back in places with a tissue just to let some of that texture really come through. Now, that character that you know so well because you've sketched so many times in your sketchbook, you're going to sketch that on to the cartridge paper at the bottom of the tunnel, looking up. I'm now adding a darker layer of walnut ink, using it to describe the roots and branches that weave throughout her home. This time the ink is less diluted, so it gives a much richer, heavy pigment, darker return, and therefore it sits on top of what you've done earlier, the diffused layers, and it creates a natural sense of depth, as if some parts were closer while others recede back into the soil. At the same time, I start to block in the simple shapes of the character, and I use walnut ink for the mole's soft fur, but gouache for the clothing. And I'm keeping everything loose at this stage, no tidy lines, just in case I want to push one edge back or I want to pull another forward later on with detail. move into the detail with the sharp coloured pencils and fine brushes and a little bit of white gouache, I try to avoid outlining the character. This will make it really flat. So instead, describe things through pattern and texture. Whiskers, fabric details, the eyes, the glasses, and add soft shadows to give more form and quiet definition. A useful tip at this stage is to take a photo of the piece and crop it so the edges sit neatly against the painting. Then print it out on just an A4 sheet of paper. That crinkling you can hear in the background is my cat has found a brown paper bag that is very necessary to sit on at the moment. Where was I? Print out the image on an A4 piece of paper and use that to experiment with cutting out shapes or even words, and that way you don't have to commit to the original with an idea that you might not be too sure about. It's a really simple way to test ideas and play with composition while keeping the artwork safe until you've made that crucial decision. So you might actually do a few of these. Also use these practice pieces as planning tools for the inside of the burrow illustration. They're a safe space to work out scale, pacing, and how different elements might sit together before committing to the final piece. A thing that I particularly picked up while I was doing this, if I had a cutout from the front page, obviously you'd be able to see through to the inside, and I wanted to make sure that the see-through had a warm glow about it, so I didn't want to cut through to a dark piece of soil. I wanted to cut through to the light of the burrow. I wanted to add archaeological treasures into the soil, and I started by cutting them out. In hindsight, I think I prefer them simply painted on. I did test the cutouts on the A4 dummy, but they didn't translate very well when I scaled it up to a larger piece. And if I were doing this again, that's definitely something I'd change. It's important to notice these moments, and that's how you reiterate a design, by paying attention to what works, what doesn't, and letting the process shape the next version. I then sketched the burrow chambers, sometimes using a light box to help line up the shapes from the front cover and check out the cutout positions. If you don't have a light box, daylight through the window just works just as well. Just make sure it's during the day. It's a simple way to keep everything aligned, and you don't have to overcomplicate the process. Then it was back to building those rich brown soil layers again, using the walnut ink and spray effects to deepen the soil and shadow. So remember, you've got a mix of 50-50 bleach and water. You've got a mix of ink, black ink and water in your spray bottles, and you can use this to build up the texture in very light layers. Use a tissue to mask off any areas, use a kitchen roll to mask off any areas that you want to protect. Inside the burrow chambers, I switched to a warm yellow gouache diluted with water. It gives the sense of space, a depth and a warmth and a coziness, like light being held underground. Using the walnut medium neatly rather than diluting it, you can add twists and gnarly bits of branches, and you'll see from the mood board that I've attached for you where I've got this idea from, and it sits so perfectly in this illustration because it looks part interior design, part natural and expected. And I've popped in little spots of white, almost to act as like little fairy lights within those branches. I searched Pinterest for cozy interior references for moles' rooms, a little library, a bedroom, a cloakroom and similar spaces. And I've gathered those images into a PDF mood board for you, so you can use that as a starting point. But please do feel free to mix it up with your own ideas and research too. I could have easily gone to town here, adding all sorts of extra details, but to keep this lesson as compact and as focused as possible, I've kept things simple. Using the light box again, I trace the character shape so I can colour the other side of her, keeping everything aligned. As a final touch, I shave soft yellow ochre pastel onto the edges of the brown just to soften it and give it a quiet glow. And I do that especially on the front page, and that helps hint at what's waiting inside. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson and the opportunity to work in this way. I'd love to see your versions, and please do shout if you get stuck at any point. Next month, it's Badger.